Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Tait, Mr. Goodman, Ms. Tait, I'm very pleased to see you here in person. And in fact, you were there in person for the opening of the Olympic Games. I just want to know whether this was during your personal vacation. Yes. Well, the media has indicated that you charged the Canadian taxpayers $1,000 per night for the hotel, as well as other expenses in the order of approximately $6,000. So why charge $6,000 to Canadians if you were there during your personal holiday? I was in France for my personal holiday during the Olympic Games, but during those days I was working for CBC Radio Canada. And if you were to look at all of the newspapers, it was very clear there was no hotel room in Paris that was available at a lower price than that. So this was the official hotel for the Games. I was there with other delegates, and I benefited from all of the services, for example, the shuttle that enabled us to go to the opening of the Games because there were security issues at stake. I understand, but you just indicated that you were on a personal holiday, but then you were no longer on a personal holiday. It's important to have the true version. Well, I was on holiday. That's why I did not ask CBC Radio Canada to pay for my airfare. Nevertheless, when I went to the Games, I was working on behalf of Radio Canada, of course, CBC. So you cut part of your personal holidays there because you were there 2-3 weeks a month. It doesn't matter, but you cut those in half and you charge those prices.
Mr. Giovanni.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Tait, I just want to clarify a couple of things that I heard today. So first, did you say that you were on a personal trip to France, decided to extend your vacation, go to the Olympics, and then bill the taxpayer for it? Is that correct?
I was on a personal trip to France, and I did not bill the taxpayer for my flight or travel from Canada.
What did you bill the taxpayer for?
The hotel and the train to get to Paris.
Where does your personal trip end and your taxpayer billing begin?
When I, as part of my job, being at the opening of the Olympics was absolutely expected of me, so I interrupted my holiday and took the 4 days to go to the Olympics.
Could you understand why that sounds concerning to somebody? Just because, you know, bit of a weird situation where you get to go on a trip, you're having your personal time, and then you just unilaterally get to decide what becomes work and what doesn't?
Well, not if I'm not charging the company for the trip.
But you did charge the taxpayer $6,000.
Correct. When I was working in Paris, I did, yes.
But could you understand why it would be concerning?
I would think that it would be concerning
that
it would be concerning if the CEO of CBC Radio Canada did not attend the opening of the Olympics, given it was one of the most important events of our calendar year.
But when the average Canadian hears that you're charging thousands of dollars to the taxpayer, and you are just kind of deciding when your personal time ends and your billable time begins, it gets to sort of a broader concern, and to the point about bonuses that many of our colleagues have made today, of whether you have respect for the taxpayer. Can you see why that would be concerning to the average Canadian?
I do not make those decisions alone. I always check in with my chair, and I behave in a responsible fashion.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to ask if you agree with a statement that's been attributed to you. And I'm going to quote, "The defund narrative has picked up momentum, especially as it relates to CBC television." Did that come from you?
Yes.
Okay. So that was reported last week by the National Post from an email they obtained from you, and I believe in January 2024. Is that correct?
I presume so, yes.
Okay. So when you look at the concerns over your expenses, right, which I think legitimate concerns over where your personal vacation time ends and where your billable time begins, when you see the concerns over news stories related to your bonuses that are going out and bonuses you may receive or executives receive, the $18 million that we've been talking about today, do you think any of that might contribute to what you yourself have observed as a growing movement to defund the CBC?
I absolutely do not.
Why is that?
Because I believe that having experienced now the third appearance at this committee, I would say that there is a clear effort on the part of members of this committee to vilify and to discredit me and to discredit the organization. Not one question has been asked, excuse me, not one question has been asked about the accomplishments of the public broadcaster over the last 6 years and how we have served
I think
Canadians.
our Liberal colleagues have asked you some of those questions, so I think that's not a fair representation of your time here today. But let's go back to something that our colleague Mr. Coteau asked you earlier. You referred to KPIs, key performance indicators. Would the idea that a growing movement in our country would like to defund your organization be weighed into an analysis of key performance indicators and determining whether the discretionary portions of the bonuses that you've acknowledged there is a percentage that is discretionary and not contractually obligated, that those percentages that you might consider, if people don't like what we're doing, if people don't trust us, people would like the government to take money away from our bloated organization, maybe we shouldn't be spending more of their money than we have to. Could that not cross your mind in analyzing the KPIs?
We do not take into consideration political wins or influences in determining our business metrics.
So you would call it a political reaction for the average Canadian to hear that you're doling out $18 million in bonuses, that you're billing the taxpayer for your time in Paris while on a personal vacation. That's a political concern that the average Canadian wouldn't have a pure interest in that based purely on the fact that they are giving you their hard-earned money through taxes?
I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at on this question.
30 seconds, please.
You're trying to marginalize legitimate concerns about abuse of taxpayer dollars and any accountability that we are trying as parliamentarians to introduce here, and you're saying it's purely political. And what I'm saying is the big, beautiful, growing movement to defund the CBC is not a purely political movement, but it is a matter of taxpayer accountability. Can you not acknowledge that?
I will not, Madam Chair, I will not be accused of abusing taxpayer dollars. I'm sorry, for the record. We have managed our budget extremely carefully. We were facing $100 million.
I don't think the Canadian people would agree with you.
Giovanni, will you allow Ms. Tait to finish your answer? Thank you.
We were facing a $125 million deficit. We managed as carefully as we could, and we respected the obligations we had to over 1,180 employees. I believe Canadians will understand. And by the way, 73% of Canadians still consider us the most trusted source of news. 79% of Canadians say they believe that CBC should be in the future of this country.
Is that reported on by the CBC?
I think
those facts?
Gone over time, Mr. Giovanni. Okay. Thank you very much.
I did a survey of my own, and I know it's not Toronto. It may not be Vancouver. It may not be Montreal. But here's what my constituents, when I sent out, $1.4 billion a year and bonuses of $18.4 million. That's insanity. That came from Elaine. This is from Carol. I refuse to listen or watch CBC News anymore. You know the metrics in Saskatchewan. Nobody watches or listens to CBC. Here's from Dawn. Totally unfair to taxpayers and hungry folks in our country. From Trevor, nobody I know watches or trusts CBC anymore. From Rita, waste of taxpayers' money to fund bonuses on the executives. Should be a complete overhaul from the CEO and management. That came from Rose. Joanne, CBC has been a huge waste of taxpayers' money. Defund this as soon as possible. From Dan, as a lifelong listener, CBC has lost its ways. So we had hundreds of responses from little old Saskatoon. 80%, 86% major changes to the corporation or defund them entirely. 86% out of Saskatoon. What do you say about those numbers?
I say I travel this country from north to west to east, and I also have hundreds, if not thousands, of positive remarks back on how important CBC Radio-Canada is in those communities that I have visited. In the north, in Yellowknife, in Whitehorse.
How about Saskatchewan?
And by the way, in Saskatoon,
Have you ever visited Saskatoon, Regina?
I have, both Saskatoon. I went to the Yorkton Festival.
Just 1 minute.
Okay, so
some order, please. A question was asked of the witness. Can she finish answering it, and then you can go with the other question. Okay. Thank you.
I would just point to, because there is a large Indigenous community in Saskatchewan, and we spend a lot of time engaging with those communities in the development of our Indigenous strategy. And I would say, across the board, I have heard only quite frankly, a willingness to work with CBC and with Radio-Canada to change the narrative about Indigenous people in this country, something that this organization is 100% committed to.
I've got
30 seconds.
30
Kevin.
seconds left. So from your strategy, public affairs and government relations person, on average, each visitor spends 37 minutes a month on your platforms. 37 minutes a month. Ms. Tait, that is two at-issues. 37 minutes is nothing. You talk about 21 million each month are hitting your platforms. The number that stood out to me, they're on there for 37 minutes a month. It's deplorable. You're not reaching out to Canadians. 37 minutes a month. Think about that.
Thank you, Mr. Wall.